Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Ville Chillin' Podcast. Today we're doing an episode for the People of Kentucky series. But before we get into that, some other stuff we've been doing is streaming. So Jack's been streaming some WWE 2K23.
Had some wrestling matches going, fun. You've been doing some racing,
Drifting mostly, but yeah.
I saw you got
Pretty
really
fun.
close to that edge there, dude. You
That
almost
wall,
hit that
almost.
wall, but you pulled it to the
That's
left.
kind of the goal. It's kind of the goal.
Good.
I mean, I get close every now and then, but still figuring things out. So again, sorry. Yep, another episode for the People of Kentucky series. Today we're talking about Edgar Cayce.
Edgar Cayce.
So also known as the Sleeping Prophet. If you don't know who he is, it's a pretty interesting story. And I think he's like the first person we have that isn't like as widely known today. You know, I think most of the others that we've touched on are pretty well-known names. Muhammad Ali and, you know,
People we hear
Jim Varney.
when you live in Kentucky, those are names that you grow up hearing about throughout like elementary school and stuff. I never heard about Edgar Cayce till about 10 years ago when he was on like the History Channel, I think.
Yeah.
When is that the first time you heard about him?
Probably a little before then, but I didn't really know much other than he did the whole, you know, psychic readings, I guess, quote unquote. But yeah, he was actually born in Kentucky and lived here for a good part of the start of his life. So we just thought it'd be cool to do an episode.
And one more note, this is going to be the last episode of the first season for the People of Kentucky. So, and we have something really, really nice planned for that. What's the plan?
We're gonna work on putting it all kind of in a book for the ones we've done so far, and it's probably something we'll kind of do for each season. It'll just be like part 1, part 2 or something, but just to kind of give people an easy introduction into some of this stuff without necessarily having to watch the videos, although we really want people to watch the videos too.
Definitely.
Yeah, we just thought it'd be cool to kind of document it that way too. So
Be looking out for that. We should be finishing up with that in the next couple weeks. So that'll be fun.
yep. So I guess with that, we ready to get started?
Let's go.
All right. Edgar Cayce was born March 8th, 1877 in Christian County, Kentucky, which is near Hopkinsville. And his parents were farmers, and then he had 6 children in total. Began going to church at the age of 10 and became obsessed with reading his Bible, and supposedly read it over a dozen times in the next 2 years, cover to cover, which is
At what
kind of a
age?
feat in and of itself. 10. Over the next 2 years he read it. So like from 10 to 12 he read the Bible like a lot. In 1889, so shortly after all that, while reading his Bible, he said he saw a woman with wings who told him his prayers had been answered and asked him like what he wanted most of all, or his greatest desire of all, or something along those lines. And young Cayce said that he was scared in the moment, but he told her he just wanted to help people, especially children, and settled on like being a missionary at the time. So the next night, after his teacher sent home a complaint, his father tested him on spelling, and actually Cayce kept getting it wrong, and his father grew angry and supposedly knocked him out of his chair, which
Old school Kentucky
overreaction,
discipline.
but you know, But he said that he saw the woman with wings, and she told him to go to sleep so they could help him, whoever they were. And he said he fell asleep with his head on his book, and when he woke up, he was able to recall like all the answers and the spellings. And to celebrate, I guess, his dad knocked him out of the chair again because he thought that he was just playing around, messing around with him the first time. So
classic Kentucky discipline, bro. Glad we've
guess that's the way it goes.
evolved a little bit since then.
You know, pre-1900, so I guess things were different. But within a few short years, like, he continued to just start sleeping on his books, and within a few short years, he reportedly became the best student in his class. So that would be cool. I wish I could do that, but you know,
Right, like go study and just go take a nap. You
just
know,
like, I'm gonna go to sleep. Just lay my head right here on this book. Another thing that happened to him while he was young is while playing a ball game at school, he was hit on like the base of his tailbone, and he reportedly began to act strangely. And he said that while he slept, he diagnosed himself and like basically told his parents or his family to like what needed to happen to fix him or help him or whatever. And that was, supposedly it worked, and that was the very first report of his clairvoyance, I guess, quote unquote.
And I'm looking, and I was just now looking it up. We was kind of talking about before the show. We didn't know whether or not Edgar Cayce was the first like medium or whatever, but I knew he was. I was pretty sure he was one of the first ones in America. But he is, like, it says that whenever I type in the first American psychic, John Edward pops up, but he was born in 1969.
Gotcha.
And really, the next thing, Edgar Cayce. So we know that he was before then, and really, other than him, like, before then, there might have been international. The only other international psychics was, like, Rasputin, I think, and Madame Blavatsky or something, which some of what he does kind of, like, relates to that. But other than that, like, you know, whenever he started doing that, I guess whenever he got hit with the baseball, that was really the first time in modern American history where that's happened.
Yeah. Huh. That's interesting. I mean, I figured he was early on, but I didn't realize he was like actually one of the first. So, late in 1893, his family moved to Hopkinsville, and they lived on the southeast corner of 7th and Young Streets. During his 9th grade year, his family couldn't afford the cost of schooling anymore, and he was forced to basically quit school. So he started looking for employment, which kind of took up the next few years of his life, just doing little odd things here and there, I guess. In March 97, though, he became engaged to Gertrude Evans, who was pretty much with him for the rest of his life. He stayed active in the church, always read his Bible, taught Sunday school. But some things that he said he could always see auras around people and speak to angels, and sometimes he heard voices of relatives that had passed away. So even with his faith, he still accepted these experiences, which is kind of interesting.
What was her name? Gertrude?
Gertrude.
Dude, she's a bottom B, dude, to be dealing up with all that, dude, for real. Like, dude's talking about auras and stuff. She's like, I'm down.
Why not? In 1900, he went into partnership with his father to sell insurance, but soon after, he got really bad laryngitis and couldn't speak, like, at all. So.
And he was a what salesman?
Insurance.
Oh, well, he can't do that if he can't talk.
Obviously. So since he couldn't work, he was forced to live with his parents still, and during that time, he took up photography, since you don't really have to talk to be into photography. And so he began his journey as an apprentice of W.R. Bowles in Hopkinsville. A traveling hypnotist performed in Hopkinsville in 1901 and heard about Edgar Cayce's inability to speak because he couldn't speak that whole time, and offered to try to cure him through hypnosis. And Cayce accepted, and he could actually talk while he was in the hypnotic trance, but as soon as the trance was over, he couldn't talk. The hypnotist stated that the cure failed because Cayce, though he could enter the hypnotic trance, he wouldn't accept a suggestion while in the trance. And another hypnotist from New York attempted to cure Cayce with the same outcome. However, he later suggested that, like, once Cayce's in the trance, Cayce take over his own diagnosis, basically. So it's like once he's in the hypnotic trance, tell him to cure himself. So
like, you almost had to like get his. I think what they were saying is almost like he had to get like his ego out of the way to kind of get to his true self or self-conscious or something.
Yeah. This led Cayce to meet with the local hypnotist Al Lane. Lane put Cayce into a trance, and Cayce was able to speak. And once he could speak, he told Lane to give him the suggestion to increase blood circulation to his throat. And he said that his throat actually became bright red until 20 minutes later he ended the trance, or he ended the treatment. While still in the trance, he suggested to end the treatment. And once pulled out of the trance, his voice returned to normal. Occasionally it would relapse, and he would just do the same cure again. He would have Al Lane put him into a trance and do the same thing.
After the
Eventually it stuck and it was permanent, but he said he had to do it quite a lot. Due to the success of that, though, Lane asked Cayce to do the same for his own ailments and suggest cures, and found the results effective. So after that, he suggested that Cayce use his newfound ability to help other people. Excuse me. Cayce did have doubts, since he didn't know really what he was doing while he was in that trance or asleep, and he didn't know if what he would suggest would be safe, and I know I have it in here later on, but it said that, like, while he was in his trances, he used very specific and, like, scientific terms and, like, wordings and stuff when he suggested cures. So, like, he couldn't even understand some of what he was saying, supposedly, when he came out of it.
That's what I was going to say. Like, he was using terms that was, like, beyond his knowledge, words that he didn't know, that you'd have to have, like, degrees and stuff or be, like, an expert in the field to understand what he was even saying, right?
Yeah, that's what they said. That's what all reports say. So, where was I? Cayce, he had his doubts since he didn't know what he was doing. He eventually agreed with certain conditions. One, he didn't want to know anything about the patients, like their history or anything like that, because in his mind it didn't matter, didn't really change or affect the cure, and so he didn't want to have any extra influence around that, I guess. And then he also said that the readings must be free, and if anyone was ever hurt as a result, he would refuse to do anymore. So, and with that, he started offering free treatments to townspeople and everything. Reports of the work appeared in many newspapers, which resulted in Cayce even receiving, like, letters, like written requests for diagnosis and things via mail. And he said that it worked. He said he found that his work was just as effective through written form as it was having the person standing there in the room. And he said that as long as he had the name and location of the person, he could diagnose and give a cure. But he was always still very reluctant, as in his own words, one dead patient was all that is needed to become a murderer. So, kind of deep, but it kind of shows you, like, how reluctant he was for it. So yeah, the success pretty much continued. In 1902, he began working at a bookshop in Bowling Green, And he lost his voice again, sought the usual cure from his hypnotist, and it got to a point where it was happening like every week. And as careful and skeptical as ever, he continued his readings, but he did so in secret, never took money. He also invented a card game, actually. It's called Pit. Supposedly, even though he invented it, he suggested the idea to gaming company, and he ended up not receiving any profit from said game. But and that's unfortunate.
That was like my grandpa's favorite game. That's how I met my grandma. Dude, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that game.
You're lying. But he ended up marrying Gertrude in 1903, and she joined him in Bowling Green. She didn't approve of him doing the readings, and again, he was ever the skeptic himself, but he did it anyways. And they were actually rooming with a group of young professionals, I guess, a couple of which were doctors. And the hypnotist, man, he revealed the fact that they were doing readings, like psychic readings, and he ended up losing his medical license and getting forced to close practice.
No.
So that's exactly why Cayce was always skeptical and doing it in secret, because it's not exactly a very accepted thing. But the hypnotist, man. But while in Bowling Green, after that happened, he opened a photography studio, and the doctors that he was actually rooming with formed a committee to investigate and understand his clairvoyance. And through experiments, the accuracy of his readings was confirmed, supposedly. I don't have paper proof of that myself, but he still always refused any business offers, though. And in 1906 and 1907, his 2 photography studios burned down and left him bankrupt. However, he still continued doing readings, and his confidence in the abilities grew and grew. And after having success, especially diagnosing some family members with ailments, he really gained the confidence in his readings, but he still kept refusing to make it a business in any way.
Even with his livelihood burning down, with the photography studio burning down, when a lot of people would be desperate and do something, go ahead and
make money anyway. Anyhow, yeah, he wouldn't do it. He was actually introduced to a homeopathic doctor or something out of Hopkinsville, Wesley Ketchum, and he had approached him several times about starting a business and stayed persistent. Over a couple of years, he spread information in medical circles and was even the subject of a newspaper story in 1910 regarding Cayce's readings. And Cayce was actually contacted by a reporter, and Cayce himself described it as he had the ability to go into an intuitive sleep when he wanted to, and it was different from a normal sleep. And he attributed the ability to the powers, I guess, of the subconscious mind. So Ketchum continued to push Cayce to join a company, and he eventually did accept under certain conditions, including still not taking money for his readings. So they form a business, but he wasn't going to take money for the readings. They had to find another way to get funds. His readings were recorded pretty much from that point on, and when he would read them back, he couldn't understand what he was saying because of all the technical terms like we touched on earlier. Gertrude ended up contracting tuberculosis, and the doctor gave up on treatment, but Cayce decided to do a reading, and apparently the treatment was a success. So
saved her from having to go to Waverly's.
Right. Right up the road.
Yeah.
And around that same time, though, Cayce found out that Ketchum had gambled all their money. He wasn't being honest about money and had gambled with it. And he defended his doing so by saying that the medical profession wasn't exactly backing them. But regardless, Cayce chose to quit the company and return to a photography firm in Selma, Alabama. So that's interesting. I wonder what made him go all the way to Alabama.
It's a little bit further, right? Yeah.
But his clairvoyant work continued to gain popularity, of course, and he did end up starting to ask for donations at the time to help support him so that he could actually practice full time. So he started taking it a lot more seriously. I guess after moving and doing the photography for so long, he decided to practice full time.
But it sounds like he was still never. Was it still not for profit though? Was it still one of those things where where before he would turn down any donations? At this point, he realized that it was okay to start taking them. Is that?
And it was more like donations from benefactors supporting his research, not donations from patients.
Okay, got you. So
yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, so he would find investors basically. He continued to work with a hypnotist to complete his readings. Eventually, his wife and his oldest son replaced Al Lane as his hypnotist, but so he still continued to use hypnotism to go into the trance. And he even recruited a secretary around that time to start transcribing his readings. And it's really interesting. Recorded, there's like over 14,000 readings that he did in his lifetime, and that's just what's on record. But we've been talking about his clairvoyance for a while now, and he's just now getting somebody to like actually start recording it properly. He estimated that prior to that he had done like 8,000 readings, so this is like over 20,000 psychic readings that he supposedly did in his lifetime. That's crazy.
And that's everyone for like from like children to like older people to like famous people to
anyone who needed it. Yeah.
Anyone who needed help.
Yeah. So, sorry, lost my place. So he did end up attracting the attention of many entrepreneurs who obviously wanted to use his clairvoyance for like business gain. He wasn't really down for that. He did it once, and he said that afterwards it left him feeling like unhappy with himself, or because he sold out basically, I guess. He started refusing to do that anymore. He even reportedly turned down an offer of $100 per day to do readings on a market. And $100 per day in the early 1900s, that's a good bit of money.
Oh, yeah.
In 1923, he was approached by a wealthy printer and student of metaphysics, Arthur Lammers, who convinced him to give readings on philosophical subjects. And this is kind of when his ideas in theology, I guess, started to kind of shift. And he really started to struggle with his faith
conflicting
with what his readings were saying. Yeah. Because reportedly, in his trance-like state, he spoke on things like reincarnation and Lammer's past lives. And, he didn't even believe his stenographer when he read the notes back. He thought that they made it up or something. But Lammers kept trying to convince him of the ideas to get him to, I guess, do more readings on the topics, of course, because that was his beliefs. And he eventually did convince him to follow him to Dayton, Ohio, to pursue the topics, and like metaphysics and reincarnation and things like that. He continued to struggle reconciling, of course, with his beliefs, but Lammers wanted to explore his abilities further and volunteered to put up money for an organization. So again, going back to the fact that most of his money was coming from benefactors and things like that. However, Cayce did accept, but by the time he got word to his family and they made arrangements to move them there, Lammers was broke, apparently. So,
out.
Yeah, that's another failed attempt of making that work. But Cayce decided to go back and just start doing readings on health and he ended up doing readings. He still had some like a stenographer, I guess, recording it, taking notes, and he said, or it said that it included cures such as electrotherapy, ultraviolet light, diet, massage, and less mental work and more relaxation.
Nice.
I like this guy. His readings were noticed by the American Medical Association, and for the first time, Cayce felt the need to actually become more legitimate, and he employed the aid of like licensed professionals and actually incorporate and things like that. And in 1925, the voice that had guided him since he was young advised him to move to Virginia Beach. So that's how he ended up there eventually. But at this point, he was pretty much a professional psychic. He had a small staff of people helping keep records and set appointments and things like that. He eventually did continue to do readings on metaphysical topics such as reincarnation and things of that nature, as well as health and, diagnosing ailments. He still struggled financially, pretty much. That was just a normal thing, trying to make it work in that line of work without taking money, I guess. But he did receive assistance from various benefactors, like we said. So he toyed the idea of starting like an association in a hospital. But before he moved to Virginia, he couldn't really make it happen logistically. But a benefactor named Martin Blumenthal became interested and financed his vision and bought him a house in Virginia Beach.
Nice.
And within a couple of years, so by like 1927, the Association of National Investigations was incorporated, and they built a hospital to study the readings. So it wasn't just doing the readings and recording that at this point. It was do the readings, test the cure, see if things work, track it on a more scientific basis. Blumenthal was the president, and his brother, along with several others, were vice presidents. Cayce served as the secretary and treasurer of that association. From that point on, to protect against prosecution, anyone who requested a reading had to join the association and like basically sign a kind of not necessarily a non-disclosure agreement, but a liability waiver in essence, and state that they were participating voluntarily in a psychic experiment.
Gotta protect yourself.
Yeah. The dedication ceremony of the hospital was held October 11th, 1928, and the complex included a lecture hall, library, a vault to store the research and readings, and offices for researchers. And then there was like a separate area that had a large living room, a huge garage, I think it said like a 12-car garage or something, servants' quarters, and a tennis court. And its first patient was admitted the very next day after opening. Research in many ailments and many more remedies was conducted at the facility. Eventually, there was a months-long waiting list. And, I mean, when you look at the list of things that were researched, it was everything from, like, mental illnesses to physical ailments and then metaphysical topics and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, it was pretty extensive. However, his partner Blumenthal and his brother, they ambitiously wanted to open like a university for all of it, and I think the gist is they were a little too ambitious. The university was scheduled to open in 1930, but a few days before it opened, Blumenthal called a meeting and took over the hospital to curb expenses, I guess, for the university. And after the first semester of the university, he ended his support, and the whole association closed in 1931. Which is crazy. No. So the association,
up and down.
The association was started in 1927 and closed in 1931. But it's crazy how much they did do in that time. So Cayce ended up removing his files containing his readings and just took them home. So that's the other thing, is he still kept the research
Good.
at least a lot of it. And it at least gave him an idea, and it gave him a vision. And after that, he began to focus on, more spiritual teachings. And he even had friends and family supposedly ask him how they could become psychic. And he completed several readings on the topic with varying results, but from what I understood, it kind of boiled down to
it's not genetic.
Well, it's not the point of life. You're asking the wrong questions. You know what I'm saying? Like, just be a good person, help people, embrace spiritual awareness, and just be a good person.
Nice.
But soon after, in July of 1931, the Association for Research and Enlightenment was incorporated, which is his current research center that still exists today. And briefly, what I touched on earlier, they house over 14,000 readings at that research center alone, the one that is in Virginia Beach today. And again, he estimated that prior to recording them, he had given 8,000. So that's pretty phenomenal. Like we said, his association still exists today, has a pretty large following. I know there's like a library there with a lot of stuff.
Ton of people
at the headquarters. And they're still headquartered in Virginia Beach. He had some notable clients during his time, including Woodrow Wilson and Thomas Edison. So that's pretty interesting. And he continued to give readings on anything and everything, I guess, as long as you weren't an entrepreneur trying to make money off of him, until he passed away January 3rd, 1945.
R.I.P.
He's buried in Riverside Cemetery in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and his wife followed him 3 months later.
Sad.
But the association, like we said, still continues its work today to maintain and classify and cross-reference and keep record of all the readings. And they actually do quite a bit more than that. This is the website. You just go to edgarcayce.org, and you can see it here, Edgar Cayce's ARE, which stands for the Association for Research and Enlightenment. And you can see different programs and events, things they have coming up, if it's anything you would be interested in. So
and that's everything. That's everything Edgar Cayce.
Yeah, everything. So we kind of talked briefly before. We thought it'd be cool for if we could go to Virginia Beach sometime and just see what the headquarters is like, just as kind of a follow-up to this episode. But
definitely
just an interesting person that I think kind of rounds out the essence of Louisville after the people we've already done.
Definitely.
So I guess with that, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think
all
that
I had.
Wraps up the first season of the series.
Pretty much. We'll get to work on our next list of, I guess, the next group or whatever that we're going to do.
And if anyone has any suggestions, someone that we haven't featured before, let us know. We'll gladly report on them next time.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're pretty much just looking for people who were either, born from Kentucky or had a major influence on Kentucky in some profound way, right? Because we were thinking about a couple of people who weren't necessarily born here but lived a huge part of their life here.
People that you think of Kentucky when you think about them. They may not be from here, but definitely people of Kentucky. So we'll feature them in some of the next episodes, definitely.
So, all right. And I guess with that, we'll end it there. And guess we'll see y'all next time.
See y'all next time.